Thank you very much, Nazir. Always welcome. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with you all today. And thank you, Dia, for organising an event, because I do a lot of events. And, you know, sometimes I think the whole debate has got very tired. And we need new perspectives, you know, and in particular, we need to recognise human perspectives. Actually, perhaps we need to recognise that the factors that drive individuals to violence are not unique to one group of people or another group of people. There are issues that all of us, you know, experience and go through. And, you know, and I think this is a really important part, you know, not seeing people as aliens from other planets, but actually recognising the kind of common humanity that we have. You know, I think Stephen Covey's got two interesting principles you're probably aware of. One is, I think Munir mentions, first seek to understand, then you will be understood. You know, so really try to look at the world from other people's perspectives. And when you do so, you actually provide, I think you see the links and the commonality with your own experience as well. And then Stephen Covey follows that with think, win, win, which is basically solutions. Let's solve problems. And I want to be upbeat and I want to be positive, and the eternal optimist in me, I said, we can solve this problem. You know, really, there's too much head scratching going on. And I think people are presenting a paradigm where this conflict, okay, Scott and I had an interesting discussion yesterday, it's going to go on for another 30 years. Can you imagine another 30 years of this? Really? What kind of a world we're going to think about? If we're visionaries, then we're thinking about our kids, which is we're thinking 30 years, which is a generation. You know, and unfortunately, a lot of us aren't doing that. You know, we're very short-termist. So I'm going to talk about family dynamics. All of us can relate to this. All of us have had some experience with family. And if I kind of, yeah, you know, and what's interesting about family is probably families are one of the most, you know, powerful experiences that we have. It's the primary socializer that we have. It constructs who we are from a very, very young influence. It defines who we are as people. Our personalities today, our habits today, our behavior today is sometimes, you know, the result of our childhood experiences. So it's really interesting that, you know, family is such a powerful thing. You know, we don't seem to even have that debate when it comes to the whole issue of violence, extremism, radicalization. We're not even talking about family. Now, I'm not here to batter families. I think families are getting a hard enough time globally already in the world at the moment. It's about solutions, and it's about support, and it's about interventions. You know, it's not about seeing the family as a victim, okay, or where a family member, for example, has joined a jihadist group or an extremist group. So it's not about seeing them as, nor is it there to blame them. I think, you know, it's about, you know, understanding that, you know, these are important issues and dynamics that are operating. So how can we, okay, through all the institutions that we have, be much more proactive in kind of dealing with this? Now, while I was doing this, I always like to be a bit autobiographical. I'm talking about my experience, and it just goes on. And so I'll start off with one slide, two slides, and then 100 slides later. You know, it's like, and I never finish. So, you know, at times I'm going to rush through. I love to talk, yeah, you can gather, okay? So, you know, as Nazir mentioned, I'm a preacher. Today, normally on Friday, I'm standing at my pulpit shouting at people. You know, I love it. But today I'm here, you know, talking to yourselves and loving it. So, yeah. Okay, so, our childhood experience have a long-lasting effect on our whole life. So the big question I'm going to try to kind of explore with you today is, you know, the question of, you know, how does it directly or indirectly influence and push towards violent extremism? Family is really important for Muslims. You know, as it is, I think, on a global level, it's not unique to Muslims, but family takes this particular significance. We're very family first, very family orientated. But the Muslim community has many, many cultures and many, many models around parenting. My own background as a British-born Pakistani is that it's very different from someone from Horn of Africa, from Indonesia, from someone from South America, a South American Muslim. So there are kind of different practices all over. But what I'm going to try to show you through is some of the challenges and some of the experiences that you can see have some kind of an influence. And just to take you through, and I'm going to come back to these cases, what takes 3 British-born women, and this is my hometown of Bradford in West Yorkshire, 3 British-born women taking their 9 children into a war zone. What's happening there? Okay, and why is it's kind of bizarre, I'll return to this. Isn't it a bit bizarre that these 3 British-born, intelligent, educated women found more emancipation and liberation and realization and empowerment in the Islamic State compared to a street in Bradford. Kind of bizarre. You know, that similarly, maybe some of our young people here in Norway find more, that I can find a place where I feel at home with a family that actually accepts me there rather than here. It's kind of bizarre in a way. Or the case of Temur Abdul Wahab, close to these shores, born in Iraq, brought up in Sweden, very integrated. You know, you're probably aware he committed a lone wolf attack, blew himself up. Okay, fortunately didn't kill anyone else in Sweden. What's interesting about Temur Abdul Wahab is that, look, he comes from a really loving family. Beautiful wife and kids. Mum and dad very supportive. Somehow, all of that programming here, all of this experience, something overrid the whole thing and caused him to go into the very streets that he was quite integrated in. You know, he was very integrated, you know, in terms of, you know, you drink, girlfriends, very kind of like part of the society, and then suddenly attack that society. And then this last case, Omar Farooq Abdul Wahab, known as the Pants Bomber, sadly, he packed his underwear with explosives, tried to detonate it on a transatlantic flight. Born into a privileged, wealthy Nigerian family, father, you know, head of a bank there. So what is it between father and son? You know, an educated child, quite aspirational, went educated in London, head of an Islamic society at the university there, then chose to do it. What is it? Is it the evil ideology here? Or are there other human factors at play? So I'm going to try to revisit these stories if I have the time. But it's a really quick journey. Now, one of the interesting things about interventions, I'm sure there's government people here, agency people here. I use this little tool that what we tend to do, why don't things work? We throw loads and loads of money at stuff all the time, but it doesn't seem to work. Because one of the things we do is we only affect one space. And we haven't got anyone changing the whole space. And I'm talking about one of the spaces today, which is the home and the family, which is a very powerful space and a very important space that we actually work more proactively with. Not when there's, you know, we're not there to put fires out when the crisis occurs, but, you know, we need to recognize that there's a lot more support that's needed beforehand. But we're not changing the rest of the space. So my young people, I can do loads of stuff in the community space, with the youth space, but they're profoundly still kind of angry that there's nothing happening at the global level, or at the local UK policy level, or, you know, the home affairs level. Nothing which kind of shows that, you know, I'm trying to make them tolerant. I'm trying to get them involved in participation. I'm trying to get them to realize that, you know, they can make a change, but none of the other spaces are changing. So it's a part of profoundly kind of like upsetting thing. So what I do in the home is similar with regards to lots of anti-racism work. I can do brilliant work in school, but as soon as someone goes back home and they hear racist language and abusive language and supremacist language, it's difficult to kind of like, we need to have a multi-layered approach. And unfortunately, when you look at the resource that's actually going into this, and I think Scott mentioned himself, where's the resource with young people? Where's the multi-billion pounds that we're putting into young people rather than obviously into kind of military kind of solutions? I'll make some of my material available here. So is it a case of bad parenting? Like I said, I'm not here to bash parents. I've got 5 kids, it's hard. Okay, one's 21-year-old and one's 3-year-old, so it's kind of, it's a bit challenging, yeah? Okay, so parents construct who we are from childhood in all aspects of our life, positively or negatively. And what I'm finding is that certainly within lots of Muslim cultures, Pakistani culture in particular, when I can talk about mostly, there tends to be poor transition issues. There tends to be an absence of kind of, in particular from childhood to adulthood. I think this is a very significant juncture, you know, in terms of individuals discovering who they are. I think in certain cultures, what we have is this inability to manage puberty and adolescence well with kids. And from a very young age, young people start to disconnect emotionally, physically. There seems to be a conflict of values between one thing that they're getting at home and one thing that they're experiencing in society. I'm going to talk about sexual frustration later. Imagine you come from a socially conservative community where you don't even talk about sex, you know, and you don't have any of that discussion, living in a quite permissive society which is over-sexualized, and you're profoundly caught in between, and then there's no one helping you navigate and, you know, tightrope walk, you know, navigate those particular kind of issues. So the dislocation and fractures start to occur, okay? And I'm finding ineffective approaches to parenting rather than deal with some of these challenges, mediate, conciliate. What we tend to do is we make these rifts wider and wider. And what we're going to see in a lot of the experiences we have, again, this is not unique. This is not unique to violent extremism. I want to broaden it out and look at it more holistically. A young person who's disaffected, disenchanted, has that anger, frustration, wants to be heard, has all the vulnerabilities there. The young person there can manifest that in all manner of different ways, whether it's a gang, whether it's a cult, whether it's a substance abuse, whether it's mental health problems, or whether it's antisocial behavior, sexual exploitation and sexual violence. But obviously we're talking about violent extremism today. I'll give you an example. It's like, everyone can relate to the concept of running away to the circus, And I've got to say, this is the Muslim equivalent of running away to the circus. And people say, well, come on, these guys are beheading individuals. And how can you equate that with running away to the circus? Well, that's just the reality of the world we're living in. This is the reality of how people have become desensitized to violence and extreme violence in the world that we live in today. So it can manifest in all manner of things here. And I've had calls, running my youth work, I get calls 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning with a parent absolutely distraught because their child has been pulled into one of these channels and their whole world starts to fall apart. So they say, help me, help me, help me. I had one case last week of an individual with a substance abuse problem. I need a rehab. I'm prepared to pay thousands every week for rehab services. And obviously, I said, look, I'll do what I can. I'll work with this individual and I'll see what progress I can make with them. But how do you expect me at the age of 18, 19, 20 and plus to deal with the 18 years of social programming that you put in before that? You want me to overdo that with my magic wand? Okay, so that's kind of the part of the challenge that we have. And recognizing that often things are far too late. And people recognize a lot the cultural and family dynamics of this. I want to talk a bit about my own experience here. And I wrote a little piece for radio in the UK. It was a piece of advice to myself when I was 20. Thought it was quite an interesting kind of exercise. Maybe you want to do it to yourself and ask. So this is one of the pieces of advice that I gave myself. You need to know that your vulnerability is your desire for a compassionate father figure who will be proud of you. Be careful because your vulnerability will mean that you replace one tyrant with another. What may seem like compassion and concern will be manipulated and exploited. He will make you try to do things weren't right. Don't give up all your control for someone you seem to think has all the answers, and because you fear losing the false love they threaten to withhold. Part of vulnerability of needing a father figure is that you overcompensate and idealize a particular individual. And that's how individuals latch onto gangs and jihadi groups who they see as surrogate families, and powerful males in particular, who they see as surrogate father figures. But this also links to a very fundamental thing about identity. It links to something all of us as human beings want, really, this sense of belonging, a sense that, that I feel comfortable. I don't have to explain myself. I'm understood by other people. I can have that openness. These are things maybe people in the audience take for granted, or you can perhaps resonate with your own life, the need to feel comfortable in a particular space. And because of that, individuals do have a sense of always running away, looking for a space where they can feel that, having a self-hate for where they grew up because of the fact that, this, square block doesn't fit into the round hole. I'm just not fitting in to the society. Feeling at home and finding your place is so important. And that's why young people have always had counterculture for decades, if not centuries. Counterculture is the space where I can express my individuality and grow. And one of the interesting things I think about counterculture is this. Counterculture is about art, as a lot of it. It's about the creative process. And so therefore, I think it's about love, beauty, and hope. Unfortunately, what the counterculture that we're offering a lot of people today isn't that counterculture. It's a counterculture of death, destruction, hopelessness, and lovelessness, unfortunately. And so what this does is that it creates this kind of view that we're always on the outside. Imagine feeling estranged And the collective family experience of Islamophobia, individuals themselves, as we know across the whole of Europe, there's a rise in Islamophobia in nearly every EU country, manifesting hate crime and discrimination, and media portrayals of Muslims. So that's it. But this isn't just an individual, this is a collective family experience. You know, you spoke about the man with his sister in Paris who was racially abused. It's a collective experience. Of being on the outside and being othered all the time, and then imagine the double whammy of being estranged on a societal level and then estranged with your own family. That I don't even fit in here as well. I use the term coconuts and mangoes because this is kind of like two models around, the whole kind of integration debate. You've got assimilation on one side and you've got, like I said, isolation on the other side. You know, integration is a brilliant word because it means that you actually kind of really dovetail well into the kind of society. So what's a coconut? A coconut or a Bounty bar is someone brown on the outside and white on the inside. You know, so that again kind of reflects that, you've assimilated. Or what's a mango? A mango is one who's fresh from the, off the boat or fresh off the plane into the society. But all of them reflect the same thing of being kind of very much on the outside. Okay? And linked to being on the outside, again, this is the thing. They want to put you in a box and label you. And there's no shortage of labels, I think, that you can throw at Muslims. There's no shortage. In fact, there's a different label every week. If you're not I had a call this morning from radio where an individual in a child abuse case, so, that's the pedo label, the pedophile label that, again, is applied. Okay, and by not only is society putting you in a box, your own family is putting you in a box, as I'm going to come on to how they want to define and map out your whole future for you. See, I kind of don't know how it happened, but when I was young, as a kid, I turned to my parents and said, I want to be an artist. I told you about this. I want to be an artist. And they were really confused because they've never had that discussion. They said, we people don't do that thing. We're not artists. You're going to be a doctor. Okay, or you're going to be this or that. So it's interesting, your whole future being mapped out for you. You're just a passenger in the person. So what this does is that this directive, this prescriptive type of parenting that is very common across all Muslim cultures, okay, causes this loss of individualism, as parents live vicariously through their children. Why? Because in a culture which is based on status, caste, power, position, and wealth, your children are means of social mobility. And Europe has provided an interesting vehicle for that because through education, you've got significant social mobility, certainly in kind of a number of kind of European countries. So people who came from absolutely impoverished backgrounds have become quite wealthy as a result of that. So there's a loss of individuality and there's an inability to personally express yourself. So what it means is that you're almost pushing people into a channel where they'll have, and bizarrely, violent jihad is a form of personal expression. And a person's, I use this formula, which is that, imagine this formula. One, what ISIS say to their recruits, you are unique. There is no other people on the whole face of this world who are doing what you are doing. You are the vanguard, you are the foremost. In Arabic language, وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ, which means that you are the foremost of the foremost. It's very charismatic and persuasive. And so you are unique. Then plus religious conviction that, I have absolute certainty that what I am doing is the truth. And I always find that that's formula, uniqueness plus conviction equals significance. Someone powerless, invisible, someone who couldn't define their future now becomes significant and powerful and has arrived. Family first. Issues related to family have a strong influence on radicalization. In many cases, there's strained relationships intra-family, within the family. In particular, the father-son fracture is a big factor. And the mother-daughter and the father. Because, one of the interesting things about the whole jihadi brides debate is this idea that somehow the girls are exploited, they're groomed. No, they act on their own agency. The girls are no different to the boys. The males are no different to the females. They go through exactly the same family dynamics, and they act on exactly the same agencies and the same strains within the family. But also there are compelling influences within the family, as you'll see. Individuals who do want to share their ideology. A husband wants to share it with his wife. A father wants to make sure all their children are brought up with the ideology. So that's also there within the family. Okay, loyalty, respect, status, honor, what we call besti and izzat. The whole idea of honor and respect is very important in tight-knit, socially conservative communities. So you can't escape and be yourself. I like to come to Norway because I can escape a bit. Okay, no one knows me here. Okay, so, you know, and, but it's interesting, you know, you need somewhere where you really can be yourself. Because when you imagine the situation, you're walking down the street and every uncle knows where you are, and people have told me that's similar to, oh, we've got our eye on you. You know what you're kind of doing. Coming from a tightly knit, socially conservative community creates real pressures on your conformity. So what this leads to is, okay, double life. I'm going to come on. It comes to what I call double life syndrome. From a very young age, Muslim kids, and I don't think, again, it's unique, but I know I'm talking about it from this particular. Muslim kids learn to have this double role. Nice respectability, going to the mosque, doing everything, even having an arranged marriage to satisfy their parents. And then subsequent to that, a clandestine existence, a hidden existence in dark spaces, in ungoverned spaces, up to all kinds of extreme behavior. And I say is that kind of, there is a mass trauma to this whole experience. This is not just that's just the imams, yeah? That's a joke. That's just, yeah. Norwegians don't get my jokes. You know, double life. You know, in fact, everyone can relate to the concept of double life anyway. But why it's interesting is this, because what it means is that you have learned the tools on how to hide your behavior. And that's interesting because when it comes to online radicalization, which is obviously the primary kind of pull factor that ISIS have at the moment, young people find it very easy to go into the dark web, into ungoverned spaces, into dark spaces. And this is, again, for policymakers, one of the things that's happened, we've closed the space for debate, discussion, for exploration of complex issues around foreign policy, extremism, jihad, armed struggle, and all manner of you. We've closed the space down. When you close the space down and disrupt that space, it doesn't mean it's gone. We're just not viewing it. It becomes much more hidden. I would say before 9/11, I knew every jihadi recruiter in London, in the particular area of London I worked in West Yorkshire. I knew every circle they were. I knew every magazine. I knew every book. I knew everywhere it was happening. And then slowly, as the space closed down more and more, and we took a kind of criminal justice approach rather than confront ideas with ideas, then what started happening is that it went underground. It became much more and more hidden. So we've got to open the space. Brotherhood versus family. This is an interesting one. Why is it that the Muslim brothers override the family that you grew up with and, you know, had all that compassion and nurturing and care for you? And the dynamic is this. The relationship with Muslim brothers is often stronger than family. This is forged through a common experience of identity, conflict, estrangement, social experience, and a desire to create change. So this is their normative experience. We're all going through this same crap together, and we can relate to that. And we can relate to and then also this loyalty and bond is a strong factor in reinforcing group belonging and ideological adherence. The feelings of brotherhood and loyalty then extend to the global family, the ummah. That my loyalty to the ummah overrides my loyalty to my family. Okay, and let's not also forget as well, this is a reality across Europe, poverty, disadvantage, and underachievement in the education system. That Muslims are disproportionately, in the UK and across Europe, reflected in the most impoverished areas, coming from the poorest backgrounds. You know, I grew up in poverty. My father's a bus driver, you know, large family, growing up in the 70s, and really from a very poor background. And the reality is, you know, nearly 50% of the Muslim community in the UK, and I think, again, it's reflected in large parts of Europe as well, still live in the most impoverished and deprived areas in the country. Although poverty, again, isn't a particular driver. But what it does is that it reinforces some of the family dynamics that we're living in. And greater levels of socio-economic disadvantage linked with poor educational attainment. So young people not realizing their potential. The research that I've done in deprived areas identifies nearly 80% of young people in those areas haven't even got the basic qualifications. So therefore haven't got a stake in society. You know, haven't got the ability just to be, have the same role and the same kind of purchasing power, kind of stake in society as the kind of other members of society. So the role of class, I think, again, is a thing which is completely absent from this whole struggle as well. And it's quite bizarre that the ideologues, okay, tend to be middle class and the foot soldiers tend to be working class. Obligation, expectation, and submission to doctors and not nurses. So, doctors are really good, nurses, no, we don't do that kind of thing. The point is this, as I mentioned earlier, this expectation that you are supposed to conform to a particular, and this doesn't allow you to be who you want to be, creating these kind of feelings of powerlessness and helplessness. I'm going to move forward. So now we move on to Omar Farouk Abdul Muttalib, a Nigerian lad at 21 who tried to blow himself up. What's the story? And just kind of paraphrase the story. He speaks in his blogs about football, the same things as anyone else. Speaks about his sexual frustration, the fact that he wants to get married, but his families won't because they have an expectation of who he will marry, where he will marry, and it's got to be because of this high-status, wealthy Nigerian family. It's got to be someone who adds status to the family as well. So again, adding to these senses of powerlessness. His father, obviously, clearly a powerful male of high status. And it's unattainable also, almost unattainable that the son achieves what the father achieves. And cases that I've had is that how do I get even my father to even look at me or even recognize that I'm a person of power and status? Okay? Except that I, do something infamous, in that I achieve greater significance. But what's more interesting in Abdul Umar's case is really this, the emotional disconnect and the communication breakdown. How many times we've heard family members, whether it's mass shootings in the UK or lone wolf attacks here, how many times have we didn't know he felt like this is what he was going through. How many times have we heard that? That was, that outside there was a veneer of normality, and inside there is fundamental turmoil going on. The whole idea of men and suicide, that men commit suicides, there's often no traces whatsoever until they actually commit the final act. And again, we never knew that this is what the individual was going through. But they themselves are crying out for help. But I want to tell you how I really feel. That's what they're trying to express, but no one is actually listening to them. So we need a culture, not of one-way directives, of I am the authority, you submit, which is the kind of pyramidal structure in lots of kind of Muslim family situations across many, many cultures. We can't have that one-way directive. We've got to start creating two-way communication. We've got to create, and whatever I say has to be unquestioningly accepted as well. And when you don't, then you are disobedient. So we've got to create, this is about being much more proactive in terms of creating better communication and emotional openness, because we're dealing with a lot of headspace when it comes to young kids in families growing up. That's just a snapshot of some of what we deal with in the headspace. And obviously you can't expect parents to be counselors and things like that, yeah? Okay, let's talk about the sexual frustration angle as well, because it's an interesting one. If you come from an orthodox Islamic background, premarital, extramarital activity is considered completely forbidden. But it goes beyond that as well, because you don't even have sex and relationship education. Because I remember once I do my sex education class. It's the most popular class that I run because young people want to talk about sex. And I find it's a way of connecting with them. So I remember I was doing my boys to men class, which is about celebrating transition and adolescence. And so one parent said, I can't send my child to this class. The child will get ideas. You're going to clearly give them. I said, well, while you're there thinking that my child is innocent, most of them are out there getting pissed, getting stoned, and shagging all the time, yeah? So really, you need to send him to me, yeah? So we can actually have a dialogue and a discussion. And actually, lots of parents welcome it because, even though I do talk about sex a lot, you can't talk to your own kids about it. It's kind of weird, it's kind of bizarre. So anyway, so for young unmarried men and women, being celibate is a challenge in a over-sexualized society. This was based on my work with tact offenders in prison and what they were talking about. Prior to, especially prior to becoming an observant Muslim, they were sexually active as well. So these are the kind of real challenges. Now, how did jihadi groups overcome that? Okay, jihadi groups overcome that by saying, well, actually, you know what? You can do it. You can have a girlfriend. You can take a slave girl. You can be sexually active. And for certain individuals, that's quite compelling. And where families break down, it's quite interesting when you've got a young person who's profoundly frustrated by this, saying, oh, well, that's fine. When you're 25 or 28 or 29, you can get married after you've got a nice house and a nice job and a nice car and all these things. Obviously, that's kind of profoundly. And then this leads to, obviously, the double life syndrome again. This leads to this, twin-track life, okay, and feeling deeply conflicted as a result of that. So we need to open the space for family and wider society as well. Dads are important, and obviously, for me, the whole father-son relationship is really, kind of significant. You know, men have a need, you know, and I know Maliha's going to talk much more about this, the need for positive male role models. Where are they? Even when I do an exercise with young men around, tell me a global role model, tell me the best, you know, the most powerful men in the world, and they'll say the most powerful man in the world is a violent man. Barack Obama is and his power comes because he's commander-in-chief of the most powerful military machine in the world. And that equals power and status as a result of that. You know, and then much further down the list, we come to Nelson Mandela and maybe other individuals here. So the need for positive role models. Now, fathers, even when they're present, they're absent because they're not connecting with their children on an emotional level, and they're not having that discussion. And as Stephen Biddle says, I love the quote, you can't expect boys to be good men when they don't see good men. And then the heroic males they do see are the males who are fighting, freedom fighters, or on the front line and battling for the dispossessed and kind of liberating people. And we found that, radicalization is related to the search for a father figure and a compassionate senior male role model. So mentoring is very critical, because in the mentoring process, what you do is you provide a substitute there of that compassionate individual who maintains that positive kind of continuity in their lives. The search for role models is important. And in many ways, why do individuals latch onto an Amir? An Amir means obviously the head of Asia. Why do the individuals do that? Because they need that kind of powerful, charismatic kind of component in their life. Unfortunately, because of stigmas and taboos, I've touched on some of them already, there's too much that can't be said. And even, I suppose, even in this discourse as well, this whole debate, there's too much that isn't said. There's too many elephants in the room, okay? And really, we've got to, because lots of things aren't said, then that creates the conflict between the home and school and society, because there's a disjuncture in value base here compared to there. This is important in terms of individuals, from a kind of Muslim, but contextualizing Islam, not within a, South Asian context or a Middle Eastern context or a 1400 years ago context. You have to contextualize it with your live challenges now. And then by doing that, you can create a reconciliation process. So the need to open the space and smash the taboos. So one of the ways I smash the taboos, as I said earlier, is my course that I run. I chose a deliberately provocative title, The Joy of Muslim Sex, Love and Intimacy, yeah? And it was interesting because more people kind of focus on the title. They say, isn't that kind of a bit wrong? I said, what do you want me to call it? Do you want me to call it the misery of Muslim sex instead, or the disappointment? Yeah, it's just probably right for a lot of people. No, so, okay. I've touched on the double life syndrome, because double life syndrome isn't just the fact that you lead this clandestine existence, but it's also the fact that you feel very dislocated, and that dislocation from your own family. And it's also about a double standard. There is a double standard which exists. People evidently feel it, that, one group of people treated are different. Certainly we've had a double standard in our community in terms of Muslim women. Muslim men get away with lots of stuff that Muslim women don't get away with. And in many ways, when we come onto the whole issue of, jihad, women's participation in jihad, it's that sense of seeking equity, that we have the same ability to affect change and be global change makers as anyone else. I want to move on quite a bit here. Just can I keep on going, please? Yeah, because I want to go into the last two cases that we have. Can we keep on going, please? It's got a bit carried away. Keep on going, please. Yeah. Okay, just back, please. Yeah. So there are three dynamics. If I sum up everything that I'm talking about, there are three family dynamics. Dynamic number one is rejection of the family and opposition to the family. Your family are not Islamic enough. Okay, and therefore to actively seek the surrogate family. Number two is a desperate desire for acceptance and recognition and status and within your family as well. A deep concern to safeguard and honor them and make them feel proud. My sacrifice is for them. It's a tragic case that someone told me about a young boy brought up by the Taliban in a madrasa in Pakistan who was a failed suicide bomber. And so when he was questioned, he was asked, why is it that you wanted to do this? He said, look, I wanted to memorize the whole of the Quran. By memorizing the Quran, this has a virtue for your parents in that they receive an intercession to go to paradise. So I wanted to do this just for my parents. And then he says, I tried to do it. It was hard. I couldn't do it. And this is the love that he has for his family and parents, which sums up this point number 2. And then this group of people said, but you can do it this other way, by killing yourself in the way of Allah. By killing yourself, then you will, again, intercede for your parents. So it just shows you the vulnerability of the mindset, this desire to want to make the family proud. And the last one is the need to convert the family, the need to, indoctrinate them with their same sense of values and same sense of beliefs. That's saying that my time's up as well. Just going to move on quickly, yeah? And some of the messaging that I'm going to go to is your family, okay, will go to paradise, okay, because of your actions. Your family are disbelievers. Your family clearly don't understand Islam at all. We excommunicate them. And then what follows on from that is that your family, you must protect your family from anti-Islamic influences. And the only place you can do that is in the purity of the Islamic State. And then we are your true family. Your family really don't understand you except ourselves. And then the needs of the global family are greater than your own needs. So those are the things that we're playing through, really. And I'll just finish with this case of the Dawood sisters. What was going on with the Dawood? We had loads of analysis. The whole global media descended on the street in Bradford, where, I'm a councilman just in that particular area. So it was my manor. And what was interesting about this case is that how did they go? Why did they go? Now, and in a lot of the analysis we had, that obviously the brother was already there, so that there was a family connection. Maybe that was a trigger point, that the police were aware of it, and maybe that was a push factor there as well. But when I really analysing it, knowing the local reality, these 3 very talented girls, completely stifled by a socially conservative, austere culture, never allowed to be themselves. That the only way that they are more in a prison in 1 square mile of Bradford, which is their whole life, than the Islamic State. And that's really what this whole journey was about, taking their whole kids across to Syria. And so the family dynamics obviously are a kind of key aspect to it. Okay, I hope that's been a lot of food for thought. Thank you very much.